In this video, we are going to learn about acid-base balance. pH affects all the functional proteins and biochemical reactions. That is why it is very important that pH it stays in the normal physiological range. Normal pH of the body fluids is it is 7.4 in the arterial blood, and in the venous blood and in the interstitial fluid it is 7.35. In the intercellular fluid, the pH inside the cells it is around 7 because metabolic processes they are happening inside the cells. So we take the pH range normally from 7.35 to 7.45. If the pH is below 7.35, we will say that this is acidosis, and if it is above 7.45, it is alkalosis. Now let's see where this hydrogen ion it is coming from. So there are metabolic processes that are happening in the body. As a result, the hydrogen ion it is produced. A small amount we take in the diet, but the majority of the hydrogen ion which needs to be taken care of, because hydrogen ion it is responsible for acidosis. It is produced in the body due to the metabolism. There are many phosphorus containing proteins. When they break down, they release phosphoric acid into the extracellular fluid. Now phosphoric acid, it is an acid, although it is a weak acid, but it is an acid and it contributes to the H plus ions. And then lactic acid, it is formed by anaerobic respiration of the glucose. It also contributes to H plus ion. Then fatty acids and ketone bodies, they're from the fat metabolism, and they also donate an H plus ion to the environment. And then we have hydrogen ion which is liberated when carbon dioxide it is converted to bicarbonate in the blood. The reaction we are all familiar with. Let's write it down here. Carbon dioxide plus water, they convert into H2CO3. H2CO3 is also a weak carbonic acid, we know, and then this in turn is so and this reaction is reversible. It can go in either direction, remember. So this is also one of our sources of hydrogen ion. Now that we have seen where the hydrogen ion is coming from, now let's see how the body takes care of it. Concentration of hydrogen ions, it is regulated by three mechanisms. The first mechanism is the chemical buffer system, and they are very rapid because they are already present in the body, they are already present in the blood. So when the imbalance happens, they are there to take care of it. Then the second mechanism, it is the respiratory centers, the brainstem respiratory centers. When we were doing respiratory system, we learned that in the medulla there are respiratory centers in the medulla and the pons, and the one in the medulla it is specially it responds to the pH change. And when the pH changes, it increases the rate of respiration and the depth of respiration. When the rate and the depth of respiration is increased, more carbon dioxide it is expirated, it is expelled from the body. Now if you in your mind you bring that equation, H2O plus CO2 is equal to H2CO3. So in this way acid it and this reaction goes in either way. So carbonic acid it dissociates into water and carbon dioxide, it is expelled from the body, and this acts within 1 to 3 minutes. The chemoreceptors, they're very sensitive. They detect the pH change, and they stimulate the respiratory system and the respiratory center. It immediately it starts acting. And then we have third system, which are renal mechanisms. Renal mechanisms, they are more potent, but they require hours or days to affect the pH changes. And these two, the brainstem respiratory center and the renal mechanism, they are known as the physiological buffering systems. Now let's start with the chemical buffer systems. Let's see how they act. We know from the properties of the chemicals that the strong acids, when they're put in water, they dissociate completely. So this is hydrochloric acid. Hydrochloric acid is a strong acid. When it is added to the water, it dissociates into hydrogen ions and chloride ions. Compared to this, a weak acid, some of it dissociates, other stays in the same form. So these are, some of it has dissociated into hydrogen ion and bicarb ions, and the other is present as carbonic acid. And similarly is the true for strong bases. Strong bases, they dissociate easily in the water, and when they dissociate, they quickly tie up with the available free hydrogen ions, whereas the weak bases, they accept hydrogen ions more slowly. Chemical buffers, they resist the pH change if a strong acid or a strong base is added. If a strong acid is added, there will be too much H plus available, and the chemical buffer, it is going to bind to the free hydrogen ions. And similarly, if there is if it needs to be to release hydrogen ions, it will release hydrogen ions in case of alkalosis. So we will talk about it more in a while. So we have three major buffering systems: bicarbonate buffer system, phosphate buffer system, and protein buffer system. Bicarbonate buffer system, it is made up of mixture of carbonic acid, which is a weak acid, and salt of bicarbonate. For example, sodium bicarbonate. So now this is a weak acid and this is a weak base. And this buffer is present both in the intracellular and the extracellular, but it is only important in the extracellular buffer system. So this bicarbonate buffer system is important in the extracellular fluid compartment, and it means that it is important in the blood. Blood is in the extracellular fluid compartment. And now just look at this example. If a strong acid is added, so hydrochloric acid is a strong acid. So what happens, that this weak base component of this system, sodium bicarbonate, it combines with it and it takes up the hydrogen ion and it makes weak acid. Carbonic acid, although it is still an acid, but it is very weak compared to this strong acid, and it releases less hydrogen ions in the solution. So this is how this buffer acts. So the pH, it decreases only slightly, and this buffer continues to act unless all the available bicarbonate, which is known as the alkaline reserve, it is used up. Now this bicarbonate component, this part of this buffer system, the bicarbonate, it is regulated by the kidneys. And this weak base can also be potassium bicarbonate or magnesium bicarbonate. It is not that it has to be sodium bicarbonate. So the bicarbonate is present, just like over here in the first statement if you read, it is carbonic acid and a salt of bicarbonate. This can be sodium bicarbonate, this can be potassium bicarbonate, this can be magnesium bicarbonate. Now, what happens if a strong base is added to this buffer system? So we are talking about carbonic acid bicarbonate buffer system. So if a strong base is added, now NaOH, this is a strong base. Now the carbonic acid, it reacts with it and it turns it into a weak base, sodium bicarbonate and water. So again, the rise in the pH is only slightly. We know when it is alkaline, the pH, it rises, it goes up, it becomes more than 7.45. And H, it ties up the base, for example, OH, the released. And carbonic acid supply is almost limitless because carbon dioxide is released by respiration and subject to respiratory control. So this component, it is controlled by respiration. Now again, I want you to bring that reaction which I just talked before, that this can dissociate into water and carbon dioxide, it will be expelled. And if the body needs more of this thing, then it will retain the carbon dioxide, and that carbon dioxide can then neutralize this strong base. Because that carbon dioxide will not stay as carbon dioxide, it will attach to the water and it will be made into carbonic acid. The second chemical buffer system is the phosphate buffer system, and its mechanism of action is almost the same like that of the bicarbonate buffer system, and it consists of sodium salts of dihydrogen phosphate, H2PO4, this is a weak acid, and monohydrogen phosphate HPO4. This is a weak base. So just notice that there is only in this there are two hydrogen. In the base form there is one hydrogen. So we have all I'm going to add is I'm going to add NaH2PO4, NaHPO4 minus 2. So this is unimportant in buffering in the plasma because it is present in very low concentration in the plasma. For the bicarbonate buffer system, I said it is more important in the extracellular fluid, which includes the blood and the plasma. And it is effective buffer in the urine and intracellular fluid where phosphate concentrations are high. Now this is how it acts, and as I said on the previous slide, this 1H, this is the base, and this is with 2H, this is the acid. So when a strong acid is added, the weak base it reacts with it and it turns it into a weak acid. So now there will not be too many H plus ions in the solution and the pH will not change dramatically. Similarly, when a strong base is added, that strong base that is converted, it is converted into a weak base, and this is how it prevents a dramatic change in the pH. Now we have a third type of chemical buffer systems. These are our protein buffer systems. We know our proteins, they are made up of amino acids, and this is an amino acid. You have already learned it in your 137 course. So each amino acid, it has an R group. That R group, it is attached to an acid group, COOH, and an amine group, NH2. So so it means that every protein in itself, it has an acidic group and a basic group. So protein molecules, they are called amphoteric. Amphoteric means they can function as both weak acid and weak base. When the pH rises, the organic acid or the carboxyl groups can release hydrogen ions. So this group, when it releases hydrogen ions, the pH, it will increase. So this acidic part, it can release hydrogen ions, and when the pH falls, NH2 groups, they can bind these hydrogen ions. They can bind to hydrogen ion and they can become NH3. So in this way, it acts as a buffer. Hemoglobin, it also functions as an intracellular buffer, and we saw that when we were doing transportation of the carbon dioxide, that the reduced hemoglobin is the hemoglobin which is bound to a hydrogen ion, HHB. Remember, if I can write here, so it just to remind you, this is how reduced hemoglobin we write it for. So it also acts as a buffer, and it takes up a hydrogen ion. And oops, I'm sorry if I've not written it very clearly, but this is the reduced hemoglobin. This is how it is written, and it is showing that it has a hydrogen ion attached to it. Now, this is a quick summary of everything we read. That bicarbonate buffer system, it is mixture of carbonic acid and bicarbonate, and this can be sodium bicarbonate, potassium bicarbonate, or magnesium bicarbonate, and it is mainly active in the extracellular fluid or plasma and our blood. They are extracellular fluid. It operates also a little bit in the intracellular fluid, but its main site of action is extracellular fluid. And then we have phosphate buffer system. They are salts of H2PO4 or HPO4. So it will be sodium H2PO4 or sodium HPO4. And this one is a weak acid. This is a weak base. It is more important in the urine and in the intracellular fluid because they're present in large amount over there. And then we have protein buffer system. So our amino acids, some of the amino acid chains, they can act as weak acids because each amino acid, it has a COOH group and a NH2 group. So this group connect as a weak acid and this connect as a weak base. So this is known as amphoteric compound because it has both the weak acid and the weak base, and they are most important buffer in the intracellular fluid, also in the blood plasma. Now let's see what is the respiratory regulation of the hydrogen ion. There are as we said that we went over the chemical buffers, and now we have the physiological buffers. The first physiological buffer is the respiratory system, and the second physiological buffer is the renal system. So let's go over respiratory system. So respiratory and renal systems are the physiological buffering systems. They act more slowly than the chemical buffer system, but they have more buffering power. Respiratory system, it eliminates carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is an acid. Why? Because consider this reaction. And remember this reaction, it goes in either direction. It can go in this direction and it can also go in the reverse direction according to the needs of the body. It can go in either direction. All right. So this carbon dioxide portion, it is very easily manageable by the respiratory system, and when the body needs to be needs it feels the need to remove carbon dioxide because there is too much of the acid, too much of the H is present. They think that this means there is acidosis, so this H will combine with this bicarbonate and make weak carbonic acid, which is it will dissociate into water and carbon dioxide, and water will be removed. So if you look at it, we have removed this H from the body. So this is all. And if there is alkalosis, then what respiratory system will do, that is the rate of the respiration and depth of the respiration, they will decrease, and this will be held in the body, and this reaction will go in this direction, and H plus will be released, and this is how it will help the alkalosis. Okay. During CO2 unloading, reaction shifts to the left, which we already did when we were doing the hemoglobin oxygen loading and unloading. So during unloading, it shifts to the left and H is incorporated into water. And during CO2 loading, the reaction shifts to the right and H is buffered by the proteins, right? We know that how this goes. So respiratory system, it is one of the physiological buffering system, and it does that by monitoring the carbon dioxide, and this reaction goes either ways. Now let's see in a little more detail. Let's remind ourselves this chart, which we already have learned in the respiratory system, that what happens if the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide in the blood rises. This is known as hypercapnia. Hyper, more, and capnia is for the carbon dioxide. There is more carbon dioxide in the blood. It activates the medullary chemoreceptors. Those medullary chemoreceptors, they increase the respiratory rate and depth because there is a respiratory center present in the medulla, and that increases the respiratory rate and depth. And then also these increased H plus ions, they also activate peripheral chemoreceptors. Peripheral chemoreceptors are present in the aorta and the carotid bodies, if I can remind you, and they also cause increased respiratory rate and depth. Now this H, it can be, so this PCO2, it increased because of hypercapnia. Okay, increased carbon dioxide, it led to acid, it decreased pH, and which was detected by the medullary chemoreceptors. So this H, it can be due to anything. Okay, maybe it is due to carbon dioxide, and because of that reaction, there is more hydrogen ions being released, or maybe it is due to some metabolic reason. For example, maybe body is making too much lactic acid, or maybe the person is diabetic and they are making ketones. So this source of H, it can be due to any acid. Remember, all the acids, they dissociate into hydrogen ions. They give away hydrogen ions in the solution. Even the weak acids, to some extent, they dissociate into hydrogen ions. So this rising H plus, it can be due to any reason. And this stimulates the peripheral chemoreceptors, and the result is the same. They also cause increased respiratory rate and depth. And both of these reactions, they cause the carbon dioxide to be removed from the blood, pushing the reaction to the left, and which reduces the H plus concentration. So just remember, it is the arrow is going here, the arrow is going to the left, and we know on the left the CO2 and water, they are sitting. CO2 is being made, and then this CO2 is removed from the body. So just let me just put, because it is written on the slide, it pushed into the left. We are talking about this reaction. And on the other hand, there is bicarbonate, and then if we go towards the right, there will be dissociation of H and this. So the reaction is moved to this uh, instead of this side. Over here is the bicarbonic acid. If I can just write it small, I'm sure by now you know this equation very well. But just so I don't want to write on that. So this is where the reaction, this reaction, instead of going this way, it is going this way. All right, now let's move on to the next slide. And now what happens when there is alkalosis? And when there is alkalosis, this reaction is going to go this way. And now we have more H plus ions, and this will correct the alkalosis. And now the respiratory system, it can itself also cause impairment, and it can cause acid-base imbalances. If there is hypoventilation, it means that enough carbon dioxide is not being removed. Carbon dioxide, it is being kept in the body, so it will lead to respiratory acidosis. And when there is hyperventilation means that too much carbon dioxide is being removed. It can lead to respiratory alkalosis. And changes in the alveolar ventilation can produce dramatic changes in the blood pH. So why? Because if for example, if the ventilation it doubles, the pH can change by 0.2 value. So from 7.4 it can go to uh, from 7.4, it can go down to 7.2 if it is. And similarly for the hyperventilation, it can go up to 7.6, and the change in ventilation, it can be up to 15 times. So it can be a very dramatic change in the pH if the respiratory system it goes bad. Now let's come to our second physiological buffer system, which is the renal system. So kidneys are the boss in this acid-base balance. They are the ultimate acid-base regulatory organs, and they because the chemical buffers, they cannot eliminate the acid or the bases from the body. They neutralize them, but they cannot eliminate them. And then the respiratory system, it can eliminate only the volatile carbonic acid by eliminating the carbon dioxide. So it can only eliminate the volatile acid. Kidneys, they can eliminate the non-volatile, which are known as fixed acids which are produced by the cellular metabolism. Which are those acids? Phosphoric acid, uric acid, lactic acid, ketones. They are all produced in the body due to cellular metabolism, and kidneys are the only organs which have the ability to get the body rid of these acids, and it prevents metabolic acidosis. Kidneys, they also regulate blood levels of alkaline substances. They renew the chemical buffers. For example, if the bicarbonate portion of the bicarbonate buffer, kidneys can synthesize new bicarbonate. We will go over that in a little while. So they can renew the chemical buffers, and so they are the major role players are the kidneys. Now let's see the renal regulation a little more. So kidneys regulate acid-base balance by adjusting the amount of bicarbonate in the blood. Okay. For the respiratory system, it was the carbon dioxide. For the kidneys, they alter the bicarbonate. They play with the bicarbonate. They either decrease it or they increase it. So what do? They either conserve or they generate new bicarbonate, and they can also excrete bicarbonate. So in the first step, by conserving or reabsorbing or generating new bicarbonate, they increase the bicarbonate, and when they excrete the bicarbonate, they're decreasing the bicarbonate. So what will they do if there is acidosis? What will kidneys do in this equation? They will increase the bicarbonate. If there is acidosis, for example, due to respiratory cause, what is kidney renal compensation? They will increase the bicarbonate. So bicarbonate can neutralize the hydrogen ions. And if there is alkalosis, kidneys will try to get rid of the bicarb. And this is very interesting. It sounds complicated, but it is not. We will go over it. When kidneys, they excrete one bicarbonate ion, it is just like gaining one H plus. How is that? Because it goes in a circle. We will go over it, but just the effect of losing one bicarbonate ion is just like you have the body has gained one H plus ion, because now this you can say that this H plus ion is unbalanced. Just to remember, renal regulation of acid base balance, it depends on kidney's ability to secrete or retain the hydrogen ions. So to absorb bicarbonate ion, kidney must secrete hydrogen ion. Kidney is not controlling the hydrogen ion. It is it is controlling the bicarbonate ion. But to preserve or secrete the bicarbonate ion, it is secreting the H ion. When it secretes the H ion, it reabsorbs one bicarbonate ion, and vice versa. Now let's see. So this bicarbonate ion, which is maintained by the kidney, this is known as the alkaline reserves of the body. And kidneys, they replenish or reabsorb this alkaline reserve in the tubules. Tubule cells, they are impermeable to bicarbonate, but they are permeable to carbon dioxide. So now kidneys, it means just imagine there is a bicarbonate and it is going in the filtrate in the urine. So this is a bicarbonate ion and it is in a renal tubule and it is going down to be excreted in the urine if it is not reabsorbed. So now the kidneys, the tubular cells, they do not have the ability to directly reabsorb it. So how do they reabsorb it? They change it into, first it is converted into carbon dioxide by the same reaction. I will not write the whole. I'm not writing that there is also water. Maybe I should. So this is the carbon dioxide. It is changed into this, and now the tubular cell can absorb the carbon dioxide, and once it takes it inside, I'm sorry about this line. So once it takes it inside, then it is again going to convert it into the bicarbonate ion, and that bicarbonate ion, that is going to be reabsorbed into the blood. So kidneys, they cannot absorb this. They cannot absorb this. So but they change it into carbon dioxide, and then they take this into the tubular cell and they convert it back to bicarbonate ion, and then this bicarbonate ion is reabsorbed in the blood. So this is how kidneys do it. And then this bicarbonate ion, it goes into the blood. So this is a blood vessel. It goes into this middle portion. It is the tubular cell. This one is the renal tubular cell. So it absorbs it like this. This is renal tubule. This is the cell lining the renal tubule. And so this absorbs the carbon dioxide, converts it into bicarbonate, and now this bicarbonate is the one which goes into the blood. Let me make it red so you can know this is the capillary. All right. So this is how this happens. So, and this mechanism, it is coupled to the hydrogen ion secretion, right? So for every bicarbonate ion which the kidney absorbs, it secretes a hydrogen ion into the tubule. So we will see that in more detail. Let's move on. All right, so where does this happen? This hydrogen secretion, which is coupled to the bicarbonate ion, just remember in your mind that kidney is trying to alter the bicarbonate concentration. It is trying to reabsorb the bicarbonate. For that, it has to secrete the hydrogen ion because the mechanism is not that simple. It cannot simply pull the bicarbonate ion out of the filtrate. It has to secrete the hydrogen ion. So don't get confused that it is trying to manage the hydrogen ion. It is trying to manage the bicarbonate ion. Hydrogen ion secretion is coupled to the bicarbonate reabsorption and first occurs in the proximal convoluted tubule and then in the collecting tubule type A intercalated cells. Remember when we did the anatomy of the collecting tubule, we learned that there are two types of cells in the collecting tubule, principal cells and the intercalated cells. Then we learned that there are two types of intercalated cells, type A and type B. So this type A cells, they are important in the secretion of the hydrogen ions. And what is the first step? The first step is that carbon dioxide and hydrogen, they form bicarbonate in reaction catalyzed by carbonic anhydrase. And this bicarbonate breaks down, and now this is happening inside the intercalated cell. Okay, this is intercalated cell. Just imagine this is happening inside the intercalated cell, this step. I'll put IC for intercalated cell, IC. So inside the intercalated cell, what is happening? That carbon dioxide and this reaction bicarbonic acid is made, and then this carbonic acid, it breaks down into hydrogen and bicarbonate. And then in step 3, this hydrogen is active. Now we will leave the bicarbonate for a while. And I'll come back to it. So this first, let's see what happens to the hydrogen ion. The hydrogen ion is actively secreted into the lumen, and this bicarbonate, it goes to the blood. It is absorbed in the blood, right? And now for every hydrogen ion secreted, sodium is reabsorbed from the tubule. Because now on this side is the tubule. We will go over diagram, it will be more clear. I will not dirty this slide. Okay, then in the step 4, now we are in the lumen. The hydrogen combines with the bicarbonate, forming carbonic acid, and this H2CO dissociates into carbon dioxide and hydrogen, and CO2 diffuses back into the tubular cell. So now this reaction, it is happening in the in the tubule. This is happening in the filtrate, in the tubule, not in the tubular cell. It is happening in the tubule. That intercalated cell is the tubular cell. This is happening in the tubule. That again, this hydrogen ion which was secreted, it combines with the bicarbonate. This is actually how it is bringing the bicarbonate back in. And then again, the carbon dioxide is absorbed into the cell because the tubular cell, the intercalated cell, it cannot absorb the bicarbonate directly from the filtrate. So it is going through an indirect route. Let's see, let's move ahead. And this is a link of the video of pH balance in your book. Now let's go over this diagram, and we can see, let's go over it step by step. Let us orient ourselves with this diagram. This is the tubular lumen, and this is the tubular cell which is lining the tubular lumen. This is proximal convoluted tubule, like we said in the previous slide. The reabsorption of the bicarbonate, it happens in the proximal convoluted tubule, and in the collecting duct. In the collecting duct, it is the intercalated type 1 cells. So let's look at the step 1. Step 1 is carbon dioxide and water, they combine and they make the carbonic acid. In step 2, this carbonic acid is quickly split and it forms hydrogen ion and bicarbonate ion. So now this, after it's split into hydrogen and the bicarbonate ion, this hydrogen ion, it is secreted into the tubular lumen, and for each hydrogen ion secreted, a bicarbonate ion, it is absorbed into the peritubular capillary, and it enters via a symporter with sodium or via an antiporter with chloride. So this is symporter, the bicarb and the sodium, they are both going in, and this is antiporter. The bicarb is going this way and the chloride ion is coming that way. The hydrogen ion, it is secreted into the lumen, and in the lumen it interacts with the bicarbonate ion. This bicarbonate ion is present in the filtrate which was made in the Bowman's capsule. It attaches with this bicarbonate ion, and so this bicarbonate ion, it disappears from the filtrate at the same rate at which this bicarbonate is being absorbed here. So this combines with this, and now we have carbonic acid, and this carbonic acid, it dissociates into water and carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide, it diffuses into the tubule where it triggers further hydrogen ion secretion. So in this way, uh, the kidney, it has salvaged this bicarbonate ion. This bicarbonate ion, because on the apical surface there are no such proteins which can absorb the bicarbonate. The kidneys cannot directly absorb the bicarbonate, so they go through all this trouble. So this bicarbonate is changed into carbon dioxide, and this carbon dioxide comes in, then again carbonic acid is made, and this bicarbonate ion is absorbed, and this hydrogen ion again goes in the filtrate to go over in this cycle again. Now this was absorption of the already present bicarbonate ion in the filtrate. The kidney, also generates new bicarbonate ions. Metabolism of food, it generates new hydrogen ions, which must be balanced by generating new bicarbonate ions. Secreted hydrogen ions used to reclaim filtered bicarbonate, it is not actually excreted from the body. It is incorporated into the water molecule, which is reabsorbed. So body has same number of bicarbonate and hydrogen ions as it started out with. There are no net gains actually, although it is managing the pH balance, there is no net gain. So the body, it also needs to generate new bicarbonate ion to balance these newly generated hydrogen ions. There are two mechanisms which are present in the proximal convoluted tubule and the type A intercalated cells which generate new bicarbonate ions, and they are the first one is via excretion of the buffered hydrogen ions and via NH4 excretion. Now let's see how this system works. Now keep in mind, now the body is not reabsorbing the bicarbonate ion. Now it is going to make new bicarbonate ion. Now let's look at the first buffer system. So the most important urine buffer is the phosphate buffer system, and intercalated cells actively secrete hydrogen into the urine, which is buffered by phosphates and excreted in the urine. New bicarbonate is generated in the process and moves into interstitial space via co-transport system, then moves specifically into peritubular capillary bed. I'll talk about it more just in a little while when I put the photograph on. Now this is now this is a lumen, right? And this is our tubular cell, type A intercalated cell of the collecting tubule, right? Now let's see step by step what is, and this is our capillary. Now let's go step by step over this diagram. So step 1 is that carbon dioxide inside the cell, it combines with the water and we make carbonic acid. This carbonic acid, it quickly dissociates into hydrogen ions and the bicarbonate ions. In step 3, the hydrogen ion, it is secreted into the lumen, and the bicarbonate ion, it is absorbed into the blood, and it goes through this antiporter, this chloride bicarbonate antiporter, which is present in the intercalated cell. Now this secreted hydrogen ion, when it goes in the lumen of the tubule, it combines with HPO42. So this H, this is the basic component, and it combines with this and it forms H2PO4. Now this H2PO4, as you can see, it is excreted in the urine. It is not reabsorbed in the blood. So this is now the kidney. It is getting rid of this H. This goes out in the urine. Now this important is this, that this carbon dioxide, this is not reabsorbed from the tubular lumen. This carbon dioxide, it is synthesized inside the tubular cell by the metabolism of the tubular cell. So this bicarbonate, this is synthesized inside the cell and it is absorbed in the blood. So this is a new bicarbonate which the kidney cell has um, added to the blood, with the intercalated cell of the tubule has added to the cell. So now let's see what happens in another mechanism. Another is via NH4 excretion. This is more important mechanism of secreting acid, and it involves the metabolism of glutamine in the proximal convoluted cells. And each glutamine produces two NH4 molecules and two new bicarbonate molecules. Bicarbonate, they move to the blood, and NH4 is excreted in the urine, just like we saw in the case of phosphate. That's how body managed it. Now let's see how this happens. Let's go over this photograph step by step. So in the step 1, there is glutamine, right? Glutamine, it is an amino acid. Glutamine, it undergoes metabolism, which is deamination, oxidation, acidification. All right, and the result is two molecules of 2NH4 and two molecules of HCO3. And then what is the fate of this? This 2NH4, it goes into the lumen. This bicarbonate, it is absorbed into the capillaries, and we have a symporter, a sodium symporter, because now we are in the proximal convoluted tubule. So we also have a symporter here. And this sodium potassium ATPase, it is providing the secondary active energy. This NH4, which goes in the tubular lumen, it is excreted in the urine. So it means that this cell, it has synthesized two molecules of bicarbonate. These are two new molecules of bicarbonate, which the tubular cell has added to the blood. Now we talked about acidosis, what happens in acidosis in the intercalated cell. Now when the body is in alkalosis, type B intercalated cells, they can do the opposite. They can secrete the bicarbonate into the lumen, and they can reclaim the H plus to acidify the blood. Mechanism is opposite of bicarbonate ion reabsorption process by the type A intercalated cells. And this is important to know that even during alkalosis, nephrons and collecting ducts, they conserve bicarbonate more than they excrete. So because of their primary, they are tuned to conserve bicarbonate. Even when there is alkalosis, already there are the body needs to rid of bicarbonate. So the kidney, it does try to excrete the carbonate, but even in doing that, it conserves more bicarbonate than it excretes it. We went over the buffer systems and how they operate. Now let's see what can go wrong, which will cause acid-base imbalance. So all imbalances, they are classified as either respiratory or metabolic. So there is respiratory acidosis, respiratory alkalosis, metabolic acidosis, metabolic alkalosis. So now respiratory acidosis and alkalosis, as the name tells, they are caused by the failure of the respiratory system to perform the acid-base balancing role. And the single most important indicator is the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide in the blood. So in the arterial blood, usually we check the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide. You must have heard the term ABGs, arterial blood gases. So a blood is taken from the artery, and then the amount of the gases, it is checked in the blood. And then we have metabolic acidosis and alkalosis, and they are all the abnormalities other than those caused by the partial pressure of carbon dioxide levels in the blood. And the indicator for metabolic acidosis and metabolic alkalosis is bicarbonate. Let me elaborate a little. So when there is respiratory acidosis, there will be increased carbon dioxide retention, right? And when there is respiratory alkalosis, there will be increased expulsion of carbon dioxide from the body. So the body will be retaining less carbon dioxide than it needs to. And in metabolic acidosis, what we will find that there are low levels of bicarbonate ions. The levels of bicarbonate ions, they are lower than normal level. And in alkalosis, we will find that the bicarbonate levels, they are higher than the normal levels. Like I said before, the most important indicator of the adequacy of the respiratory function is partial pressure of carbon dioxide. Normally, it is between 35 to 45 millimeters of Hg. It is measured in the arterial blood. So partial pressure of carbon dioxide above 45 millimeters of Hg is called respiratory acidosis. And it is a common cause of acid-base imbalances. And why does it happen? Due to decrease in ventilation or gas exchange. Whenever there is some problem in the lung, it can lead to respiratory acidosis. And whatever problem or whatever disease process in the lung which is causing decrease in ventilation or the gas exchange. For example, emphysema. Emphysema is our obstructive uh, it's a COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or due to pneumonia or cystic fibrosis. So any of these things which is compromising the ventilation and gas exchange. And then what happens, what is the end result? That the carbon dioxide, it accumulates in the blood. So, and the blood pH, it drops slow. And when the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is below 35 millimeters of mercury, we call the condition respiratory alkalosis. Why respiratory? Because it is because of the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide. And it is common in hyperventilation. When someone hyperventilates due to anxiety or stress, they blow out the carbon dioxide from their body, and it can cause a respiratory alkalosis. Now in this table, let's go over the respiratory acidosis and respiratory alkalosis. So if uncompensated, so this is, we are right now discussing the simple what will happen if there respiratory acidosis, because normally what happens when there is respiratory acidosis, the lungs are responsible for the acidosis. The kidneys, they try to compensate, and because of that compensate the values of the partial pressure of carbon dioxide and bicarbonate, they will change somewhat. So the picture is not going to be you can say like as it is in the uncompensated case. So first we learn about the uncompensated and uncorrected. Excuse me. So the partial pressure of carbon dioxide will be greater than 45 millimeters of Hg, and the pH, it will be less than 7.35. And what can cause cause this? Impaired lung function. So impaired lung function, for example, chronic bronchitis. This is a COPD, obstructive lung disease, or it can be due to cystic fibrosis. It is restrictive lung disease. When the membrane across which the gas exchange is going to occur, there's a problem in that. Then there can be emphysema, or all of these conditions. So impaired lung function, due to whatever reason, it leads to impaired gas exchange or alveolar ventilation. And then there can be impaired ventilatory movements, for example paralyzed respiratory muscles, chest injury, or if there is extreme obesity. So this is now the carbon dioxide is not being removed. Why? Because of the movement problem. And then there can be narcotics or barbiturate overdose, because these substances, they cause depression of the respiratory centers, the narcotics and the barbiturates, and they result in hypoventilation and the carbon dioxide is retained. Similarly, if there is injury to the brain stem, it can also lead to hypoventilation and acidosis. Now let's see respiratory alkalosis. So respiratory alkalosis, these values are if it is uncompensated, right? When the kidney starts to compensate, these values will somewhat change. They will not totally come back to normal, but they will somewhat change. Okay, so in respiratory alkalosis, if it is not being compensated by the kidneys, the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide, it is going to be less than 35 millimeters of mercury, and the pH will be greater than 7.45. And what can cause? Strong emotions, pain, anxiety, fear, panic attack. People, they hyperventilate and they just blow out the carbon dioxide. And then hypoxemia, asthma, pneumonia, high altitude, they represent effort to raise PO2 at the expense of excessive CO2 excretion. So now the body is removing the carbon dioxide to to in, um, to increase, so that the oxygen can take over, and oxygen can cause the respiratory drive. And then there can be brain tumor or injury, which can lead to abnormal respiratory controls. So the most common cause by and large of respiratory alkalosis, it is the emotions, the hyperventilation, the voluntary, kind of like not voluntary, but when they're anxious, they just hyperventilate. Metabolic acidosis. What will we find in metabolic acidosis? Low blood pH. Whenever there is acidosis, the pH will be low. So whenever we are looking at the we're trying to find out if it is acidosis or acid-base balance. First of all, we establish whether this is acidosis or it is alkalosis. So we look at the pH. pH of the blood. The pH of the blood is low. It means it is acidosis. And then we look at the bicarbonate ion. The bicarbonate ion is also lower than normal. So that means it is metabolic acidosis. And what can be the causes? Ingestion of too much alcohol, it can lead to acidosis, because alcohol, it is converted to acetic acid. And then there can be excess loss of bicarbonate. For example, if someone has a diarrhea, they are losing in the fluid, they're also losing bicarbonate, and that can lead to metabolic acidosis. Then accumulation of lactic acid. It can be due to exercise. It can also be due to shock, or if in diabetes the people are making too many ketones, there is ketosis. Or starvation, kidney failure. Why renal failure? Because there is electrolyte imbalance. Kidneys, they play a very important role in maintaining the electrolyte balance. So all of these conditions, they can lead to metabolic acidosis. Metabolic alkalosis. So there will be increased blood pH. So when we are dealing with acid-base balance, first of all, we look at the blood pH. Blood pH is increased. So now it is alkalosis. Then we look at the bicarbonate ion. Bicarbonate ion is increased. So it is metabolic alkalosis. And it is much less common than the metabolic acidosis. It can be caused by excessive vomiting. If someone vomits a lot because our stomach contains hydrochloric acid, so if that person, someone is having too much of the vomitings, they can go into alkalosis. And it can be intake of excess base. How that can happen? If someone is on antacids and they take overdose of antacids, so they can also have metabolic alkalosis. What are the effects of the acidosis and the alkalosis? What effects it has on the body? So now let's see. When the blood pH is below 6.8, it means that this is severe acidosis. What happens? There is depression of the CNS, and this can lead to coma and death. And when the blood pH is above 7.8, so this is also alkalosis, there will be overexcitation of the nervous system, which leads to muscle tetany. You know, tetany, there are sustained contractions of the muscles, extreme nervousness, convulsions, and death often comes from the respiratory arrest, because the respiratory muscles, the diaphragm and the external intercostal, they they stop functioning. So now there are two important systems. We have respiratory system and then we have renal system. They both compensate for each other. If acid-base balance is due to malfunction of one physiological buffer system, other system tries to compensate. Respiratory system attempts to correct the metabolic acid imbalances, and the kidneys, they attempt to correct the respiratory acid imbalances. Now let's see what is respiratory compensation. So lungs, they try to compensate for the metabolic pH problems by changing the respiratory rate and depth, because this is what they can do. So in the metabolic acidosis, the respiratory system, it compensates by increasing the rate and depth of bleeding. Sorry, not bleeding, breathing. It increases the depth of breathing and the rate of breathing. When there is high hydrogen ion levels, they stimulate the respiratory centers. Just bring into mind that diagram with the chemoreceptors in the brainstem, in the medulla, and also the peripheral receptors. When they detect there is low pH, they increase the rate of breathing and the depth of breathing. Metabolic acidosis with a respiratory compensation, it is indicated by a blood pH below 7.35. So there is acidosis, just like when we are trying to diagnose a case of acidosis and alkalosis, we have to find there are some questions. The first question is, what is the pH? Right? So if the pH is below 7.35, it is acidosis. Just for a reminder, the normal blood pH is 7.35 to 7.45. So if the blood pH is below 7.35, now we know this is acidosis. Now we have to know that what is the cause, if it is metabolic acidosis or respiratory acidosis. Now we have seen that there is low bicarb level. What is the normal bicarb level? It is I think 22 milliequivalents per liter to 26 milliequivalents per liter. So when it is below 22 milliequivalents per liter, this is in the blood, this is low bicarb. Now there is low pH and there is low bicarb. Now I'm writing on my paper, it is metabolic acidosis. Now question number 3 is there compensation? Now I look at the carbon dioxide level and I find the carbon dioxide levels are below normal. It means that carbon dioxide is not responsible for the acidosis. If the acidosis was because of, it is also confirmation of my second question, that is it metabolic or because if it was respiratory acidosis, the carbon dioxide levels will be high. But now I have to see and but the carbon dioxide levels are below normal. It means that it is trying to compensate. They are not normal as they should be. It is normal. And remember, the lungs, in 1 to 3 minutes, they start compensation. And so below normal mean less than 35 millimeter Hg as lung blow off more carbon dioxide. Now this is giving me an idea that there is respiratory compensation. Now let's see what happens in metabolic alkalosis. The respiratory system, it tries to compensate by decreasing the breathing. Slow, shallow breathing allows carbon dioxide to accumulate in the blood and lower the pH. Metabolic alkalosis with respiratory compensation is indicated by. So let's ask our question number one. Question number one is, what is the pH? First of all, we have to be sure that if it is acidosis or it is alkalosis. So now we have seen that the pH is high. So it means it is alkalosis. Now question number two, I look at the bicarb. Question number two, I have to see the bicarb. When I saw the bicarb levels, they are elevated. So now in my mind I'm thinking, and I can write it on my paper to tell myself where I am, that it is metabolic alkalosis, right? Because this is high, so I tell myself this is metabolic alkalosis. Now I check the PCO2. Checking at the PCO2, first of all it will confirm my diagnosis, the answer of my question two answer is correct or not, and secondly I can see if the lungs are trying to compensate. So now when I see the PCO2, it is above 45 millimeter Hg. It is not normal. So because it is above 45 millimeter Hg and the pH is alkaline, right? So this and this, they are contradicting. So this confirms my question number two answer. Yes, this is metabolic alkalosis, and yes, the lungs are trying to compensate because it is 45 millimeters of Hg. It is above 45 millimeters of Hg. 45 is the normal. So lungs are trying to compensate and build up the H plus levels. So there are three questions you have to ask when you're approaching an ACID based question, when you're going to diagnose. First of all, what is the pH? Second, you have to establish if it is respiratory or metabolic. And then number three, you have to see if the compensation has kicked in. Now let's go. Now let's look at the renal compensation. So the kidneys, they try to compensate for the pH problems caused by the lungs. So lungs and kidneys, they work together. So when the lungs are causing the problem, then the kidneys, they try to compensate. But remember, the compensation of the kidneys, it takes few hours to days to establish. All right. Now let's see. So in respiratory acidosis, kidneys, they reabsorb more bicarb, and they also create new bicarb, and they secrete more hydrogen ions. Okay, so kidneys, to compensate, kidneys are doing these three functions, and we already saw how they do it. And then hypoventilation can cause elevated partial pressure of carbon dioxide. So now when there is elevated partial pressure of carbon dioxide and the pH is low, I will say that this is respiratory acidosis. Respiratory acidosis with renal compensation is indicated by low pH, high PCO2, okay, and then carbon levels. They indicate the compensation by the kidneys. So if the carbon levels, they are increasing, it means that the kidneys have they are increased. It means that the kidneys have started to compensate. But if the carbon levels are normal, then the kidneys have not started compensation yet. So now for this, actually, when you will ultimately learn in detail, there are also some formulas for the compensation, but this is just a rough idea which we are doing without calculating anything. But to be sure, there are some formulas which we apply, putting in the values of the bicarb and the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide, and then we are sure that this that the compensation is happening. All All right, let's go to next slide. So what happens in respiratory alkalosis? Now the kidneys are going to secrete more bicarbonate ion. Respiratory alkalosis with renal compensation is indicated by low pH. So first of all, I look at the pH. It is low. Okay, it is alkalosis. Now I look at the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. It is low. Okay, I think it is respiratory alkalosis. And now I look at the bicarbonate level. They are decreasing. So it confirms my, first of all, it confirms my diagnosis that this is respiratory alkalosis. And then because it is decreasing, so the kidneys, they are trying to compensate. They are trying to compensate for the alkalosis. They cannot, what they can do, uh, they can secrete the bicarbonate ion. They can get rid of the bicarbonate ion. Respiratory system cannot compensate for respiratory acidosis or alkalosis because that is the one which is messed up, so it cannot help itself. And the renal system cannot compensate for acid base imbalances caused by the renal problems. Okay, so that is why they both help each other. Now let's go over this table. So this is metabolic acidosis uncompensated. Okay, so what will happen in uncompensated metabolic acidosis? First of all, I look at the pH. Question 1, remember, look at the pH. It is less than 7.35. It is acidosis. Then I look at the bicarb is less than 22 milliequivalents per liter. It is metabolic acidosis. And to confirm my answer, I can check the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. The partial pressure of carbon dioxide, in this case, it should be normal, right? It should be near normal because carbon dioxide is not responsible for the acidosis. So that will confirm my diagnosis. So, but for you, for this course, this is enough that you know that low pH is acidosis, and in metabolic acidosis, the bicarb is low. It is less than 22 milliequivalents per liter. Now, what are the causes where diarrhea can cause metabolic acidosis? Because the bicarbonate, it is lost in the intestine. Bicarbonate rich and intestinal and pancreatic secretions, they are rushed through the digestive tract before their solutes can be reabsorbed. Then there can be some renal disease, failure of the kidneys to rid the body of acids formed by normal metabolic processes. So in renal disease, the metabolic acids which are made in the body, they cannot be removed, and metabolic acidosis can happen. Then there can be untreated diabetes mellitus. So the lack of insulin or the inability of tissue cell to respond to insulin, they both result in the inability of use of glucose. As a result, the fats are used, and when fats are used, they're converted into ketone bodies as well. So ketoacidosis occurs in untreated diabetes mellitus. Then in starvation, what happens in starvation? There is lack of dietary nutrients for the cellular fluids. The body proteins and fat reserves are used for energy. Both yield acidic metabolites as they're broken down for energy. So in starvation, we can have metabolic acidosis. Then there is excess alcohol ingestion, and it results in excess acid formation. So these are the factors which can lead to metabolic acidosis. Now, what are the conditions which lead to metabolic alkalosis? So first of all, we have to establish the diagnosis. pH is less than 4.7, greater than 7.45. It means it is alkalosis, and the bicarbonate, it is greater than 26 milliequivalents per liter. The normal range for bicarb is 22 milliequivalents per liter to 26 milliequivalents per liter. Now the bicarb is higher than this. And then to take an extra precaution, you can always check the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, that is in the normal range. I'm talking about the uncompensated. Now, what are the causes of metabolic alkalosis? We have established the diagnosis that this is metabolic alkalosis. Now, vomiting or gastric suctioning. Why? Because our stomach, it is rich in HCl, and if too much of that is HCl is lost outside the body, that requires that hydrogen be drawn from the blood to replace the stomach acid. So hydrogen decreases and bicarbonate increases proportionally in the blood. So this is what happens. The HCl of the stomach is lost, and then the stomach, it reabsorbs the hydrogen from the blood. This leads to metabolic alkalosis. Then some diuretics, they can cause alkalosis. They cause calcium depletion and water loss. Low calcium directly stimulates the tubule to secrete hydrogen ions, and reduced blood volume. It elicits the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone mechanism, which stimulates sodium reabsorption and hydrogen ion secretion. So aldosterone mechanism, not only it gets rid of the potassium, it also gets rid of the hydrogen. And then if there is ingestion of excessive sodium bicarbonate, which is an antacid. Okay, so bicarbonate, it moves easily into the extracellular fluid where it enhances natural alkaline reserve. This bicarbonate, which is taken by mouth by ingestion, that moves to the extracellular fluid, and it increases the bicarbonate level of the blood. Then excess aldosterone, just for the same reason we discussed above. When can it happen? For example, in adrenal tumors or anything that goes wrong and there is too much aldosterone. It promotes excessive reabsorption of sodium, which pulls increased amount of hydrogen into the urine. Okay, and hypovolemia promotes the same relative effect because aldosterone secretion is increased to enhance sodium and water reabsorption. So for aldosterone, it absorbs the sodium, but it gets rid of the hydrogen ion. So that is why excess aldosterone, which can occur due to tumor or due to hypovolemia, it results in metabolic alkalosis. This is a video. I have shared the link on the Blackboard as well. You can watch it to review everything.